Hello and welcome to another Articulate Outburst podcast. As I directed in the last stream, I said I was going to do some different stuff and maybe expand a little bit away from just music and parroting my own bloody narrative. I said what I'd do is I'd go through some songs and I'd go through some processes in terms of how you decide what you're going to sing a song about, what you decide. I'm at an age now where Dancing Through the Tulips in Love is probably not a song that I could sing with any sincerity. So love story is off the menu. I think philosophy, there's a lot of philosophical quotes in our music. It's a hell of a lot of Orwell. I put a little bit of Carl Schmitt into one the other day, and obviously Thomas Sowell is pretty much haunts the second album. And that really brings me to what inspires me. How do I shape my thinking, and who do I look to in order to make music? And obviously we're punk, not the most listened to genre of music. I've got wide musical tastes and punk's not really at the top of it, but when you're singing political songs about hypocrisy and double standards, there's not really a dance music track that can accompany that. Not really techno, that's kind of otherworldly music if you like, and this is grounded firmly in working class, firmly in the north. I think we do have a northern twinge, although the second album's a little bit more universal. And I just thought I'd go through a list of people who I listen to on YouTube and the reasons why I listen to them. And this is not in any way, shape or form to promote their channels. This is just where I gain most of my knowledge from and what they've given me in terms of my thought processes. Some of these I dip in and out of. I'm not sat there all the time just listening to these people. I do listen to a lot of things about the universe, black holes, string theory and stuff like that, which is not really that much of a kind of, you can't really turn that into music unless we were going to go down the kind of Radiohead, Pink Floyd-y, different kind of otherworldly, but out there. So ours are more of a kind of march, a chant, and a little bit of an anthemic kind of rock songs. So we're kind of limited really as to what we can kind of do. So I thought, I've got a list in front of me. The first time, I'll always ring you when you don't want them to do it. So I've got a list in front of me, and ultimately you always this is no particular order at all. But this is who I listen to and why I listen to them, and ultimately the kind of ideas that they kind of come up with, or the way in which they talk about a matter is obviously the key. So the first one I'm going to come to is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's been podcasting for a while. I don't watch as much of him now. He's gone from YouTube to Spotify. I do have a Spotify account, but you get into a pattern of only watching one kind of medium. Why do I like Joe Rogan? Well, first of all, it's a 3-hour podcast. So there's no quick 20 minutes. I grew up in the 70s and 80s where Jonathan Ross, Michael Parkinson, Graham Norton in later years would have a guest on the couch for 20 minutes. Joe Rogan's got him in the studio for half a day, and that allows them to really explore a lot of options. And these things are not exactly top of the, just top of head thoughts. They really get into the nitty gritty. They do a lot of referencing, certain things come up, and they can cross-reference. And Joe, in many respects, although I'm sure it's a lot more well-managed than it comes across, I suspect it looks like two blokes in a man cave having a chat, or a bloke and a bird in a man cave having a chat. But there's obviously a studio behind them doing it all. And the reason I picked Joe Rogan is because he is prepared to have his mind changed based on evidence that comes his way. He will literally take a subject, have a belief in it, and then he's more than happy to have his mind changed. And I think we live in a world now where there's so much, in fact I wrote about it in communities, where people feel like they're siloed into one side of an argument or another. I'm pretty much the same. If evidence comes to light that differs from my position, I will take a different opinion. For a long, long time, I'm an atheist. Absolutely anti-religion, and to a certain extent organised religion still has a lot to kind of hang its hat on and to be ashamed of. But ultimately, as a country, since we've moved away from the church, we've lost a bit of cohesion. That's just a personal view. That's just something that you kind of, you see churches are empty, you see mosques are on the increase, and almost like whether, did we just abandon our religion, or did we just let the gates open for other religions to come in? I don't have an opinion either way, I'm not that spiritual. But ultimately, from my point of view, just on a personal one-to-one basis, you kind of get the general idea something's been lost because none of us took an interest in it, and I think that might be down to the church in many respects. Calvin Robinson has brought this back in spades. I think I've probably got more of an appreciation for the church, its views, and from Christ, from Calvin Robinson in the last 5 years than I certainly haven't had from the church in the last 50. So that's kind of an issue where everybody has their mind changed based on evidence and other ways in which you see it. I think Joe Rogan is the top of that tree, of getting down to the nitty gritty. He doesn't particularly pick people that will just sit in an echo chamber. He presses them, he pushes them, and he really gets to where everything is. So I think at the top, and rightly so, it's the most listened to podcast. That's where not so much my inspiration comes from, because Joe's a bit super fit, super athletic, and I'm a little bit baggy around the edges. I've got my vices. So although we are different in terms of physical demeanour and mental acuity and mental strength and physical strength, I do believe mentally, I think he's pretty much where I am. I'm really interested in why people think like they do and how they come to those opinions. So that's shaped a lot of thinking in the band. That's shaped the way in which I approach many subjects, because ultimately you can always have stones thrown at you for your best efforts, and really we're trying to do the exact opposite of what people criticise you for. So that's Joe off the bat. These are in no particular order. The next one would be Academic Agent. Academic Agent, I won't use his real name, it's been been podcasting for several years. He's introduced me to Thomas Sowell, Carl Schmitt, Mosca and Pareto, and just a lot of his stuff's beyond me, but a lot of his stuff, I can dip in and out. I've got a full-time job, I don't have time to study. I'd love to do some of those courses, but I just know that because at my age where I am, very, very difficult to accumulate new knowledge or start again. I often see in the newspapers, open university student passes degree at 70, and I'm thinking, my life is way too full to be passing degrees at 70. But the tidbits that I pick up from his table have pretty much shaped quite a lot of the way in which I think, and certainly a lot of the lyrics in the band. I think that many of the subjects he covers, I think he has his opinions. I think he's sensible centre. Still not quite a classic liberal, but definitely a sensible centre, which, given the political positions around, it's really where most of us are, because the Overton wind has shifted so far in one direction. Just bringing it back to normal makes you look like an extremist, and obviously none of us are. But that's the second one. Then you're kind of getting into the Lotus Eaters. So the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, I started watching Carl Benjamin, I think in about 2018, 2019, when I started the band. And he had a show called This Week in Stupid, where he'd go through the headlines, have a chat about it, and then point out the insanity of what we were seeing, and look at it from perhaps the best possible view, which was every view. And that kind of opened my eyes in many ways, because I think that I'd always been mainstream television, and if it wasn't on there, then ultimately I just took it for granted. I once remember about 10 years ago watching BBC Breakfast, and they'd have some human interest story on, and they're all dressed in the finery, they all look like $1 million, and I just thought, oh, these are our people, this is us. Since then, I can't watch the BBC. They just go off key, they go straight into the climate, straight into the environment, and straight into victimhood as a currency. Nobody ever interviews anybody anymore that's overcome endeavours, physical achievements, mental achievements. They only consider themselves to be overcoming mental and disability achievements, which is fine, but not when it's just wall to wall. They always look for the victimhood inside something. Even the Tina Turner, when she passed away, I mean, despite the fact that she was an absolute goddess, an absolute fucking rocker on stage, and perhaps one of the best performers of all time, they had to get abusive relationship in, even on her obituary, which I just thought, hang on a minute, she was so much more than a few years with an abusive husband. She was so much more than that. BBC couldn't help itself, in it went. So I've moved away from mainstream media, and I've got to say the Lotus Eaters, which is now what Carl Benjamin's gone on to, with a wider range of people on there, covering a wider range of subjects. I think Bo doing the history, very, very interesting. I listen to my headphones to fall asleep to, and that's no criticism of both. But what that does is allows you to gain knowledge, and I know a lot more now than I ever did about history. And that's just in the last 5 years. So there is quite a lot going on there, and it's not just politics, it's not just where we are. The reason I mention history is because in the old days I believed history to be linear. That's what we knew then, that's what we learned from it, that's what we went on to do, and that's what we benefited from. But actually, you leave it long enough and that comes back round here. I never knew that censorious free speech would ever be an issue in my life. People were banging the drum for free speech. We knew what communist Russia was all about. We knew what Nazi Germany was all about. And here we are in 2023 and people in our country, in the West, are calling for it. Hate speech. What does that actually mean? Hate speech. So needless to say, and you can actually see that the wheels are repeating. And many of my quotes are from George Orwell. The more I read Orwell, I read Animal Farm the other day. Well, listen to the audiobook actually, bit of a cheat. It's on YouTube for free. And I also listened to the audiobook of 1984. And what's going on there? George Orwell, if you open that book now, looked around today, go, bloody hell, fire. Because he was talking about a totalitarian regime. And what we're doing here is we don't actually want a totalitarian regime. Everybody seems to want it, which tells me a seed was sown somewhere else. I think there has been a march through the institutions. I think there is an entire generation of people that want to be told what to do, and curtain twitching, grassing bastards, pardon my French. But I digress. So the podcast of the Lotus Eaters is another good grounding for a good base of information, and a great, for me, because they cover the topics that really mainstream media should be talking about. You know, I go back in the day, they used to have World in Action, Panorama. What were they? Where has those in-depth interviews gone? They've just gone. So that's where I get my information from now, pretty much YouTube. And the best thing about YouTube is you can cross-reference it. You can find if someone's bullshitting. There'll be another channel pointing that out. So that's pretty much the kind of main kind of stay of what I watch. Then we've got some ones off the bat, and I'm going to quickly go through these because I'm conscious the stream's going on a bit, although I might revisit it because there's just so many there. I think Lawrence Fox, much maligned, I think, over time. I think his road to Damascus moment was on Question Time when he said the British people are the kindest people you'll ever, and he's absolutely right. We are that kind of fair play. This idea that we're all racists and goose-stepping down the mallet is an absolute joke. I think Lawrence Fox was the first person to kind of point that out to the mainstream media. The reaction to that, I think, says it all. That I think most people thought that, and we were being told differently by mainstream media. And you know, I think that was a liberating moment for many people. I think if we go back through time, I think George Orwell, all I can say is read him. I know it's become a bit of a cliche. 1984 just sang a song about it, it's on the second album. It has become a bit of a cliche using 84 as a kind of reference point, but it's true. But read Orwell anyway, just for his command of the English language. His uses, words and phrases are absolutely second to none. So whether or not you agree with his political points, listen to the language, listen to how he speaks. It's a voice from the past, but it's almost like it were written yesterday. David Starkey. Now Starkey is a polarising figure. He's been banned by just about everybody, but he's got his own channel. If you want to know anything about British history, specifically the royalty and the kings and queens, Starkey's your man. Starkey is your man. He may have some ill-gotten phrases that perhaps he's regretted in hindsight. His points were right, but everything today is taken out of context, so it never matters. I mean, God forbid you ever get interviewed by the BBC, you just have to keep your trap shut. You couldn't tell anybody anything because you know that there'll be a word snipped from a sentence and repeated and doubled, and then they'll tell you you were saying something else. So we're in a trap, we're in a minefield when it comes to anything talking off the cuff or informally. I don't think anybody can do it anymore unless you've got a script. You're kind of doomed, and even that will be subject to scrutiny. So again, Starkey, great born out. The more I kind of get into history is because the more you see what went on in the past is still going on today, making history secular, as I said. There are some bigger pictures here. So Brendan O'Neill and the Spiked team. I'm a big fan of Brendan O'Neill and the Spiked team because, again, hour-long interviews, they kind of do the news reviews. I think they're pretty fair in the balanced reporting. They look at both sides of an argument. They look at it from more than one side, if you like. I think that they're pretty good at what they do. I think I subscribe to that one. But I don't know about anybody else out there. It's getting to the point where you're thinking, hang on a minute, how many am I subscribing to here? Probably more than bloody Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV put together. And you kind of think, oh, well, maybe I'll go for the honesty box, which chips a tenner in every week. But ultimately, yeah, it's getting to the point where you think, well, what are my subscriptions looking like at the moment, money-wise, for Patreon? But on we go. There's another guy who I wish would come back to the internet called Voltaire's Ghost. All his streams are on there. Perhaps one of the most acerbic YouTubers I think you'll ever find. Funny, humorous, to the point, very, very good. Please come back. Please come back, Voltaire's Ghost. You're a pleasure to watch. Then we're kind of getting into a mixed bag of what I would call to be, not professional YouTubers, but kind of the ones that you know can do it for a living, and that'll be trigonometry. I've got a lot of criticisms about the trigonometry boys because I just think this is new media. A few years ago when I wrote the first album, I thought I'd be a great guest on there, but because things have moved, because you can't write an album in 5 minutes time, because things moved on so quick, I'm looking at them now thinking, don't send them the CD. Because I'd have thought like a few times where they would have interesting guests and all, as they say, they've now moved up a tier to pretty heavyweight stuff. So although I'll send them the CD, I'm not too sure that they'd want to do an interview, unless of course we're #1 in the charts, and then obviously then it's a slam dunk, I would have thought. But again, I think Konstantin Kisin as a social commentator is brilliant. I think it's interesting, he's got a Russian background, and obviously Francis Foster, great comedian, you can just tell, and I think they work pretty well together. Toby Young is an absolute legend. I think the idea that we have to have a free speech union in the UK in 2023 is an absolute joke. Apparently he's helped quite a few people who have been in stum over quite a lot of time. And Toby Young, to me, when he speaks at the Oxford Union, he speaks at the Conservative conferences. I just think he's just a decent guy who wants who knows right from wrong, and is absolutely so annoyed with how things have kind of gone down the pan where we're having to defend what really shouldn't be defended. As Rowan Atkinson said, the cure for hateful speech is more speech. Don't just shut people down, that makes people more interested in it. Open them up, debate them, and you'll always win. I think coming from that, I think Harry Miller, it'd be rude of me not to mention Harry Miller and the Fair Cop guys. Obviously you'll know, and anybody out there, the sentiment that song has for the police. And that came about from a gig I was at in the 70s. People were singing police oppression and all sorts of anti-police kind of stuff. And that's when I realised that punk had changed and put a different spin on it. And my kind of view was the dancing round at Gay Pride Month, the not arresting protesters on the streets, they're almost in cahoots with them. The Edward Colston statue was perhaps the pinnacle of Bristol's policing team, of just exactly how far the termites have spread and how well they have dined. But yeah, Harry Miller, fair cop, taking it to them. And then when they get a slap in the face, they still don't stop what they're doing. I'd have thought they'd have put their hands up, oh, you've caught us, okay, we're going to change the way we do it. They just stay silent, and this constant battle that Harry has is ongoing. No one's going to say, oh, you were right on that one. They're just going to keep advancing that mindset no matter what. So Harry Miller, boom. Jordan Peterson, goes without saying, he's done the reading, he knows the front from the back, he will decide what and how he speaks, he knows pretty much everything. I don't get inspired by his speeches, I think they're aimed at people who are younger, people who perhaps need a little bit more guidance, but he's based, he just says it as it is. And I've got to say, probably one person that most people kind of worked out that the internet was where your best place to get your news and comment from. So he certainly has, he certainly holds that accolade. Now there's a lot more people on my list, but they're more specialist in their kind of unique spheres. So I'm going to leave it there. I've overrun a little bit at 20 minutes, so I'm going to leave it there. But this is how I get my inspiration, this is who I listen to, and this is how it shapes my thinking. I'm going to do another one on the YouTubers. I didn't think it'd go on for quite so long. Yeah, because there's a lot more on there that really need to be covered, and I don't want to drone on all day. So if you could ring the bell, if you could press the button, subscribe, that'd be great. People are talking about me getting a Patreon subscription up. Not too sure that's what I'm about. I'm just a rock musician in the best band in the world. Or certainly I think we are, but that's a separate story. But if you could ring the bell, that'd be great, and thanks very much for all your support. Thanks for all the emails coming in. It really is great. And like and share as much as you can. Thanks a lot. See you in the next one. Thank you.